The millionaire sees his fiancée tearing up the letter from the 7-year-old son of the maid addressed to Santa Claus and reacts in an incredible way. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The December sun beat down hard on the windows of the Anderson mansion in the upscale neighborhood of Maple Street. Robert Anderson, at 52, observed through the carved wooden blinds the movement outside, where only luxury cars circulated under the shade of century-old oak trees. His imposing figure, 6'1", graying hair styled with military precision and a perfectly tailored suit, contrasted with the restlessness that had consumed him for days. "Robert, are you listening to me?" Victoria's sharp voice echoed through the marble-clad room furnished with mahogany. She was elegantly seated in a leather armchair, her French manicured nails tapping impatiently on the armrest. At 40, Victoria Smith possessed the calculated beauty of someone who frequented the best salons in the city. Perfectly straight blonde hair, flawless skin thanks to aesthetic treatments, and a body maintained by personal trainers and nutritionists. "Sorry, dear, I was thinking about the contracts in the South Side," Robert lied, adjusting his designer glasses. In truth, his mind was focused on something much more disturbing that he had witnessed 2 weeks earlier. It was a Tuesday when he arrived home early, something rare in his routine of 14-hour workdays. As he entered through the main hall, a spacious area decorated with Czech crystal chandeliers and Portuguese marble flooring, he heard voices coming from the living room. He approached quietly and saw a scene that would mark him forever. Sarah Johnson, his housekeeper, was on her knees on the Persian rug, picking up torn pieces of paper. Her normally serene brown eyes sparkled with contained tears. At 38, Sarah had the understated beauty of someone who bore the weight of many responsibilities. Brown hair, always tied back in a simple bun, tanned skin marked by a few expression lines around her eyes, and hands calloused from domestic work. She wore the navy blue uniform she had sewn herself, simple but always impeccable. "What kind of mess is this spread all over my living room?" Victoria stood with her arms crossed, her face twisted in a disdainful expression that Robert had never noticed so clearly before. "I apologize, Ms. Smith," Sarah murmured, not lifting her eyes. "My son forgot his letter here yesterday when he came to pick me up. I was just—" "Letter?" Victoria laughed sarcastically. "You let that kid into my house to spread trash? What kind of education is that?" Robert saw Sarah clench her fists, but she kept her voice steady. "It was a letter to Santa Claus, ma'am. Jake is only 7. Santa Claus." Victoria kicked one of the torn pieces of paper. "What nonsense! You can't raise these kids with fantasies. Real life is tough, and the sooner they learn, the better. Besides, what kind of example is it to enter someone else's house and leave paper lying around?" "He didn't leave it, Mrs. Smith," Sarah tried to explain, her voice trembling slightly. The letter fell from his backpack. It was a simple request. A pair of sneakers for school and what? Money? Anything else you can't afford? The cruelty in Victoria's voice made Robert take a step back, as if physically struck. Sarah finally lifted her eyes, and Robert saw in them a wounded dignity that touched him deeply. He asked to meet his father. "That's all? Oh, what a drama!" Victoria scoffed. "A fatherless child thinks Santa Claus will solve his mother's problems. Typical of that kind of people. Clean up this mess and get out of my sight. And next time, keep that kid in his low-income neighborhood where he belongs." Robert felt his blood boil. During the 5 years Sarah had worked in his home, he had discreetly observed her. He saw how she always arrived 15 minutes early, how she kept the house spotless without breaking a single object, how she prepared meals that reminded him of his late grandmother's love. He knew she lived in East Side, took 2 buses and a subway to get there, and studied at night in a technical course for computer science. "Victoria," his own voice surprised him, rough and firm. Both women turned, startled. Sarah quickly lowered her eyes and hurried to gather the papers. "Robert, I didn't see you come in." Victoria immediately changed her tone, forcing a smile. "I was just talking to Sarah about organization." "I heard everything," he said, stepping into the room. "Sarah, leave that. I'll handle it." "You don't have to, Mr. Anderson," Sarah murmured, clearly embarrassed. "It's almost done. I said to leave it." His voice brooked no argument. Sarah hesitated, then slowly stood up, smoothing her uniform. "Excuse me," she said, quickly heading to the kitchen. Robert bent down and began to collect the pieces of paper. Victoria watched him, perplexed. "Robert, what are you doing?" "It's just kids' trash." He didn't respond. In his hands, the fragments of cheap paper revealed the shaky handwriting of a child. "Dear Santa Claus, my name is Jake. I am 7 years old. I was a good boy this year. My mom works a lot and is always tired. Can you please give me a new pair of sneakers? Mine are torn, and the kids at school laugh at me. And if you can, I would really like to meet my dad. My mom said he doesn't know I exist. Can you tell him I'm a good boy? Thank you. Jake Johnson." Robert felt something break inside his chest. He stood up slowly, holding the fragments as if they were precious. "How ridiculous, Robert. It's just a poor kid trying to evoke pity." Victoria was visibly irritated by the attention he was giving to the matter. He looked at her for the first time with true clarity. He saw the calculated coldness, the complete lack of empathy, the arrogance disguised as elegance. How had he not noticed this before? "Victoria," he said calmly, "I think it's best if you go home today." "What do you mean?" "We had planned to choose the flowers for the wedding. Let's leave that for another day." That night, alone in his office, Robert tried to piece together the fragments of the letter with tape. His hands, accustomed to signing million-dollar contracts, trembled as he handled the fragile pieces. When he finished, he read Lucas's simple request again and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a genuine desire to do something good for someone. For the first time in decades, Robert Anderson questioned whether he was building the right life. The first month after the letter incident transformed Robert into a silent observer of his own home. For the first time in years, he began to notice the details that had always gone unnoticed in his automated routine as a successful businessman. It was a Monday in January when he decided to leave his room at 5:30 in the morning, an hour earlier than his usual time. The second-floor hallway, lined with imported wallpaper from France, was immersed in the morning gloom. He descended the marble staircase silently, guided only by the golden light escaping from the kitchen. He stopped at the door and observed a scene that touched him deeply. Sarah was standing by the industrial stove, preparing coffee in an old Italian coffee maker, a relic from his first wife, Emily, who had passed away 15 years earlier. Her navy blue uniform was impeccable, despite the early hour, and her hair was tied up in her usual bun. But it was the delicacy of her movements that caught Robert's attention. She moved through the kitchen like a dancer, knowing every drawer, every utensil, every corner of that space. "Good morning, Mr. Robert," she said without turning, having sensed his presence. "You woke up early today. Is something wrong?" "I couldn't sleep," he lied, stepping closer. "It smells wonderful." Sarah smiled, a small but genuine smile, and poured a cup of fine china with steaming coffee. "It's a special blend I make. Chicago blend coffee with a touch of cinnamon and clove. My grandmother taught me." Robert tasted it and closed his eyes. The flavor was completely different from the espresso he drank in the office. There was something homemade, comforting, that awakened memories of his childhood on his grandfather's farm in the outskirts of Chicago. "Sarah," he began hesitantly, "about that day." "The letter." She stiffened slightly, nervously fiddling with the dish towel. "You don't need to worry about that, Mr. Robert. It was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Robert said firmly, "and I wanted you to know that I don't agree with what happened." Sarah looked at him, surprised. In 5 years of working in that house, he had never addressed her with such closeness. She saw him as a fair but distant employer, someone who paid on time, didn't shout, but also didn't involve himself in the lives of the staff. "You're very kind," she murmured. "But I understand Mrs. Victoria's position. This is her house too." "Not yet," Robert said, and the words came out before he could think them through. A strange silence settled between them. Sarah turned back to the sink, clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected intimacy of the conversation. "What time does Lucas go to school?" Robert asked, trying to keep a casual tone. "At 7 o'clock. Class starts at 7:30. And do you live far? Sarah hesitated before answering. In East Side. But there's a direct bus line. Well, almost direct. Robert knew Chicago like few others. He understood that almost direct meant at least 2 transfers and more than an hour of travel. He did a quick mental calculation. If Lucas started school at 7:30 and they lived in East Side, Sarah must leave home at 5:30 in the morning. How do you get there? Bus and subway, she replied simply, but Robert noticed the fatigue in her voice. That morning after Sarah left, punctually at 6:15, as he discovered, Robert cancelled his first meeting and decided to do something he hadn't done in years, drive alone. He took his BMW from the garage and followed the route he imagined she took. The difference was brutal. Leaving Higienopolis, he passed through the increasingly popular central area until he reached East Side. The contrast between his neighborhood and Sarah's was like traveling to another country. Asphalt streets gave way to dirt roads. Elegant buildings were replaced by simple houses and self-built structures. The green of the mahogany trees yielded to a dense working-class urban landscape. He found Lucas's school, East Side Elementary School, a 2-story building with peeling walls and a small yard where dozens of children played. The facade was faded. Some windows had cracks repaired with tape, but there was something vibrant about the place. The voices of the children echoed joyfully, teachers chatted animatedly at the gate, and parents or guardians arrived on foot, by bicycle, or by bus. It was then that he saw Sarah arriving with Lucas. The boy was a miniature version of his mother, slightly curly brown hair, expressive eyes, and a smile that lit up his brown face. He wore a faded blue t-shirt, jeans with a patch on the knee, and a pair of sneakers that had clearly seen better days. Despite the simplicity of his clothes, he was clean and well-groomed. It was evident that Sarah took care to keep him presentable. "Mom, do you think Santa Claus got my letter?" Lucas asked as they approached the gate. Sarah knelt to be at her son's height. "I'm sure he did, my love. But remember what Mommy always says? That Santa helps those who help themselves," Lucas recited, but his voice carried a hint of sadness. "Exactly. And you are helping yourself, studying hard, being a polite boy, and taking good care of his things, right?" Jake nodded and hugged his mother. Robert observed the farewell. A loving kiss, a whispered behave, a wave until the child disappeared through the school gates. Sarah then began her walk to the bus stop. Robert followed her at a distance and calculated 40 minutes on foot to the nearest subway station. She walked with firm steps, but he noticed she occasionally stopped to massage her right foot, probably a pain caused by the simple shoes she wore. During the journey, he observed the reality of that neighborhood. Small family businesses, a bakery where Sarah bought a French bread, certainly for her morning coffee, uniformed children heading to various schools, workers waiting for crowded transports. It was a world functioning with dignity and effort, but clearly limited by circumstances that people like him had never needed to face. When he arrived at the office, 2 hours late, Robert couldn't concentrate on the financial reports waiting for him. His mind kept returning to the image of Jake hugging his mother, to Sarah's 40-minute walk, to the innocent question about Santa Claus. "Mr. Anderson," his secretary Marcia appeared at the door. "The meeting with the investors for the South Zone project has been rescheduled for tomorrow. They said they need more time to analyze the numbers." "All right, Marcia, and could you get me some information?" "Of course, sir. I want to know about public schools in the East Side area. Specifically about a school called East Side Elementary School." Marcia noted it down, clearly intrigued but too experienced to question. That night, alone at home, Victoria had gone to a charity event. Robert went up to the attic for the first time in years. Among dusty boxes, he found something he had been looking for without knowing. A photo of his first wife, Emily, playing with children from the orphanage she supported. On the back, in her delicate handwriting, "True wealth lies in making a difference in the lives of those in need." He went down to the office and, for the first time in months, opened a drawer he had been avoiding, the one where he kept the letters Emily had written him during their courtship. He reread one of them, My dear Robert, I know you sometimes feel lost among so many numbers and contracts. But I see your generous soul, even when you hide it behind that businessman armor. Promise me you will never forget that our fortune is a responsibility, not just a privilege." Robert closed his eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, cried for the wife he had lost. But he also cried for himself, for the man he had become, and who perhaps Emily would no longer recognize. The second month brought a revelation that would shake the foundations of Robert's carefully constructed life. It was a rainy Wednesday in February when he arrived home early, escaping a Chicago drenched by summer rains. The streets of Lincoln Park were flooded, and even his luxury car had struggled to navigate the waters pooling in the clogged drains. Victoria was in his office, sitting in his leather chair with various documents spread across the mahogany desk. She wore a light pink designer brand outfit, and her blonde hair was styled in an elegant bun, but there was something furtive in her movements that immediately caught Robert's attention. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" She jumped, quickly clutching the papers to her chest. "Robert, you startled me. I thought you would arrive only at night. The traffic was impossible because of the rain." He approached, noticing her nervousness. "What documents are those?" "Nothing important," she replied, forcing a smile. "I was just organizing some things for the wedding. You know how detail-oriented I am." But Robert knew every paper in his office. Those documents were not invitations or gift lists. They bore the letterhead of Smith & Associates, a prestigious and exclusive law firm in Chicago. "Let me see." He extended his hand. "Robert, it's nothing important." Victoria tried to evade, but he had already noticed the tension in her voice. "Victoria." His voice took on the tone he used in the toughest negotiations, firm, with no room for discussion. She hesitated, then reluctantly handed over the documents. "It's just a precaution, dear. My lawyer said it's normal in weddings like ours." Robert began to read and felt his blood run cold. It was a meticulously drafted prenuptial agreement, establishing that in the event of separation, Victoria would be entitled to 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, as well as a monthly alimony of $100,000. The document even specified the furniture and artwork she could take. "When did you have this made?" he asked, his voice controlled but icy. "A few weeks ago. Robert, all our friends do it this way. It's just to protect both of us." "Protect both of us?" He raised his eyes from the document. "Here, I see nothing that protects me. Just you benefiting." Victoria stood up, nervously smoothing her skirt. "Dear, you can't expect me to give up my security. After all, I'm leaving my independent life to marry you. Independent life." Robert laughed bitterly. "Victoria, you live in an apartment your father pays for, drive a car registered in your family's company name, and work in your brother's office 3 times a week organizing social events. What independence is that?" "How dare you?" she began, but he interrupted her. "And what does this clause here mean?" Robert pointed to a specific paragraph. "In the event of proven infidelity on the part of the groom, all couples' assets will revert entirely to the bride." "Interesting. And what if you are the one committing infidelity?" Victoria looked away. "That won't happen. That wasn't the question." Silence stretched between them, only broken by the sound of rain hitting the office windows. Robert watched the woman he planned to marry. In 4 months, he felt as if he were looking at a stranger. "How long have you been planning this, Victoria?" "What are you talking about?" "This marriage, this contract. Since when has our relationship been a financial investment for you?" Victoria sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Robert, be realistic. You're 52, I'm 40. Neither of us is at the age for great passions anymore. We're building a solid partnership based on social and financial compatibility." "Social compatibility," he repeated slowly. "Is that how you define what we have? Isn't it? We go to the same places, know the same people, have the same standard of living. Our marriage will make sense to everyone except for us." Victoria crossed her arms, taking a defensive stance. "Don't be dramatic, Robert. You've always known what kind of woman I am. I've never pretended to be a dreamy romantic. It was true. Throughout their 2-year relationship, Victoria had always been clear about her priorities: social status, financial stability, a comfortable life among the elite in Chicago. He had interpreted this as practicality, even as a virtue. But now, rereading the contract, he realized he had confused calculation with maturity. "You know what bothers me most about this document?" he said, flipping through the pages. "It's not even the financial aspect. It's the coldness with which you planned the end of our marriage before it even began. I'm being realistic. Half of marriages end in divorce these days, and you're already preparing to be one of those statistics." That night, after Victoria left, clearly irritated with his lack of understanding, Robert poured himself a whiskey and sat on the back porch of the mansion. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fragrant with the scent of wet earth from the meticulously landscaped garden. He thought about the conversation he had witnessed in the kitchen that morning. Sarah was teaching Jake, who had come to visit her during the school break, a permission Robert had personally granted. "Mom, why did you never marry again?" the boy had asked, drawing on a piece of paper while she prepared lunch. "Because marriage is a very serious thing, my love. It's not just living together, it's promising to take care of someone forever, in good times and bad. Like when you take care of me." "Exactly. But even bigger, it's choosing to share your whole life with another person. And you never found anyone you wanted to share your life with?" Sarah had paused, the spoon frozen in the air, and Robert saw her eyes fill with deep melancholy. "Sometimes people aren't ready to share, Jake. Sometimes they just want to take." Now, with Victoria's contract in hand, Robert fully understood what Sarah meant. Victoria didn't want to share a life with him. She wanted a part of his life. He picked up the phone and dialed his lawyer, even though it was almost midnight. "Mr. Johnson, this is Robert Anderson. I know it's late, but I need you to review a document for me." "No, it can't wait until tomorrow." While waiting for the lawyer's arrival, Robert went up to the room that had belonged to Emily. He kept it exactly as she had left it, a kind of sanctuary he rarely visited. He opened the closet and touched the dresses still hanging, feeling the soft perfume that still lingered on the clothes. "What would you do, Emily?" he murmured to the empty room. "How did you know you truly loved me?" And on the vanity, he found the journal that Emily had kept. He had never had the courage to read it, but that night he felt he needed to. He opened to a random page. "Robert brought me flowers today, not because it was my birthday or because we fought. Simply because he saw some daisies on the street and thought of me. That's what makes me sure. He thinks of me when he doesn't have to, when there's no obligation. True love isn't a contract. It's a gift we give every day, expecting nothing in return." Robert carefully closed the journal and looked out the window. In the backyard garden, he saw the light still on in the small shed where Sarah kept her cleaning supplies. Had she forgotten to turn it off? Or was she there, like him, trying to understand the direction life was taking? When Mr. Johnson arrived an hour later, Robert had already made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Johnson, I want you to prepare a document for me," he said, handing over Victoria's contract. "I want a response to this proposal, but not on her terms. You want to make a counter-proposal?" "No, I want to make a termination. Of everything." The third month brought a discovery that would touch Robert even more deeply. It was a March afternoon, when the autumn in Chicago began to announce itself with its first cool breezes, that he witnessed a scene that would mark him forever. He had come home early again, a habit he had been developing since he began to question his priorities. As he entered through the back door, which led directly to the kitchen, he heard Sarah's voice on the phone. There was something different in her tone, a controlled tension that caught his attention. "Yes, Miss Johnson, I understand the situation," she said, leaning against the kitchen counter, one hand massaging her forehead in a gesture of fatigue. "Can I come to school tomorrow morning to talk?" Robert stood still by the door, not announcing himself. He knew he shouldn't be listening, but something in Sarah's voice alerted him that it was important. "No, he didn't tell me anything at home," she continued, her voice beginning to tremble slightly. "Jake has always been very reserved. "What do you mean they laughed at him in gym class?" There was a long pause, during which Robert saw Sarah's shoulders slump, as if carrying an invisible weight. "His sneakers? Yes, I know they're old." Her voice was now almost a whisper. "I'm saving money to buy new ones, but with the technical course at night. I'm sorry, Miss Johnson. I didn't mean to make excuses." Robert felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered Jake's letter asking for a new pair of sneakers, Victoria's cruel words, and the silent dignity with which Sarah faced each challenge. "Yes, I will talk to him tonight," Sarah said, trying to maintain her composure. "And thank you for calling me. I know you have many students to care for." When she hung up the phone, Robert saw her shoulders shake. Sarah leaned both hands on the counter and lowered her head, allowing herself, for a few seconds, to show the pain she felt. "I'm sorry for the trouble, Mr. Robert," she said without turning around, having noticed his presence. "I didn't know you had arrived." "Sarah," he said softly, approaching her. "Is everything all right?" She straightened up quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand and forcing a smile. "Of course, Mr. Robert, just some issues from Jake's school. Nothing serious. I heard part of the conversation. May I ask what happened?" Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. In 5 years working there, she had never mixed personal problems with her professional obligations. "It's just a situation with his classmates, Mr. Robert. I will handle it. And what if I want to be concerned?" The question surprised her. Sarah finally looked at him, and Robert saw in her brown eyes a mix of wounded dignity and a vulnerability she was trying to hide. "The teacher called me because some boys in Jake's class were laughing at him during gym class today," she began, her voice low. "Because of his sneakers. What's wrong with his sneakers?" "They're old, Mr. Robert, very old. There's a hole on the left side that I cover with tape, and the sole is coming off. I glue it every week, but it doesn't hold up for long." Robert felt a knot in his throat. "And what did the boys do?" "They said he looked like a homeless person. One of them said sneakers like that are only worn in the trash." Sarah paused, taking a deep breath to maintain her control. Jake was so embarrassed that he refused to participate in the race. He sat in the bleachers the whole time. "And the teacher? What did she do?" "Miss Johnson is a good person. She scolded the boys and tried to talk to Jake, but he was very quiet. She's worried because this has happened before." "Before?" Sarah nodded, finally sitting in the chair he had offered. "Jake never tells me these things directly. He doesn't want me to worry. But sometimes I notice, when he comes home quieter from school, when he makes excuses not to go to some event. Why don't you buy him new sneakers?" The question came out more directly than Robert intended, and he immediately regretted it when he saw Sarah stiffen. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to sound insensitive." "No, Mr. Robert, it's a fair question." Sarah intertwined her fingers on the table. "I earn minimum wage here. I pay rent, water, electricity, gas, food, school supplies, bus fare, and I also pay for a night technical course. At the end of the month, I have about $50 left." Robert did the mental calculations. A simple pair of sneakers cost at least $80. For Sarah, that represented almost 2 months of savings. A good pair of sneakers for a child costs between $80 and $120. She continued, as if reading his thoughts. "I've been saving little by little, but every time I save a bit, some emergency comes up. Last month, Jake got sick and I had to buy medicine. Before that, the refrigerator broke. And is there no one who can help?" "Family," Sarah smiled sadly. "My mother lives in the countryside and can barely support herself on my father's pension. I have a brother, but he has 4 children and his own struggles. And Jake's father." "Jake's father," she repeated, and Robert noticed an old bitterness in her voice. "Is a successful architect who lives in a gated community in the South Side and has no idea he has a son." Robert fell silent, absorbing the information. He remembered Jake's letter asking to meet his father. He really doesn't know. "When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to tell him," Sarah said, looking at her hands. "I called his office dozens of times. I sent letters. I even went in person once. And what happened? His family has money, Mr. Robert, a lot of money. And a child with a housekeeper was not exactly what they expected for their son's bright future." Sarah paused, taking a deep breath. His mother contacted me. She offered money for me to resolve the situation. When I said I wanted to have the baby, she offered me more money to leave and never contact the family again. Did you accept? No. I said I just wanted the father to know he was going to have a child, that he could decide what to do. Sarah raised her eyes to Robert. She said he already knew and didn't want anything to do with me or the child, that I should stop bothering the family. And did you believe her? At the time, yes. I was 19, pregnant, alone, and terrified. I didn't have the energy to fight against a rich and powerful family. That night, after Sarah left, Robert cancelled a business dinner for the first time in years. He sat on the porch, watching the silent garden, thinking about the story he had just heard. He remembered his own sneakers in adolescence, always the best, always new, always replaced before they even showed signs of wear. He remembered how natural it was to have everything he needed, never questioning where it came from or how much it cost. Now he imagined Jake sitting in the school bleachers, watching his classmates run in their sneakers. Augusto hid his feet so that no one could see the bandaged hole. He picked up his phone and called Victoria, his secretary. Victoria, I need you to research a few things for me. First, I want to know everything about Eastside Elementary School. Budget, needs, infrastructure, conditions, everything. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes, I want you to discreetly find out which children's shoe stores are closest to that school, and their hours of operation. That night Robert had a dream. He dreamed he was 8 years old again, running barefoot in his grandfather's backyard, happy and carefree, without worrying about marks or appearances. He woke up with a strange feeling of longing for a simplicity he had lost along the way. And for the first time in years, he had an absolute certainty about what he wanted to do. The 4th month marked the most significant transformation in Robert's life. It was early April when the Chicago mornings began to bring the characteristic freshness of spring, and he made a decision that would change not only his own trajectory, but that of hundreds of people. He was in his office on Michigan Avenue, on the 47th floor of a glass and steel commercial building, when Victoria entered with the report he had requested about Jake's school. The corporate environment, tempered glass desk, Italian leather chairs, panoramic city view, brutally contrasted with the information he was reading in the document. Eastside Elementary School was founded in 1987 and currently serves 312 children from 1st to 5th grade, he read aloud, adjusting his glasses. It operates in a 2-story building with serious structural problems, leaks in the ceiling, outdated electrical wiring, bathrooms in poor condition, a computer lab without functioning computers. Victoria, a 50-year-old woman who had worked with him for over a decade, observed him with growing curiosity. Mr. Anderson, may I ask why the interest in this specific school? Robert paused his reading and looked out the window. Down below, Chicago buzzed in its chaotic dance of traffic and movement. Victoria, do you have children? I do, too. Did they attend public school? No, sir. I always made an effort to pay for private school. Nothing too expensive, but private. And if you couldn't afford it? Victoria hesitated, realizing there was something deeper behind the questions. I imagine I would do everything possible to provide the best education within my means. Robert returned to the report. It says here that the school has an urgent needs list estimated at $40,000. Renovation of the bathrooms, roof repairs, kitchen modernization, purchase of basic equipment. That's a lot of money for a public school, sir. It is, he agreed, but it's not a lot of money for me. That afternoon, Robert did something unprecedented. He cancelled all meetings and personally drove to Eastside. He wore a simpler suit and had swapped the luxury car for a discreet Civic he kept in the company garage for special occasions. The school was in session when he arrived. At the gate, a middle-aged woman with grey hair and a warm smile was talking to some mothers picking up their children. Excuse me, he approached politely. Are you the principal? Yes, I'm Emily Rodriguez, she replied, extending her hand.
How can I help you?
My name is Robert Johnson, he lied, using Sarah's last name impulsively. I'm a businessman in the construction industry, and I would like to talk to you about some possibilities for social investment. The principal's eyes lit up with a mix of hope and caution. What kind of investment? I would like to better understand the needs of the school. Could we talk privately? 40 minutes later, Robert was sitting in the principal's office, a small, cramped space but lovingly organized. The walls were covered with colorful drawings from the children, and an improvised shelf held books donated by the community. The situation is complicated, Mr. Johnson, Emily explained, serving a simple coffee in chipped cups. We are a beloved school in the community, but the lack of resources is constant. The roof in classroom 4 has been leaking for 2 months. When it rains heavily, the children have to attend class with buckets spread across the floor. And the city council? The city does what it can, but there are dozens of schools in the same situation. We have been on the waiting list for renovations for 3 years. Robert walked around the school with the principal. He saw classrooms with broken desks, a computer lab with 90s computers that barely worked, bathrooms in deplorable conditions, and a sports court with a cracked floor. But he also saw something that touched him deeply. Dedicated teachers, improvising teaching materials, happy and studious children despite the difficulties, volunteer parents painting a wall on weekends. How many children do you serve? He asked. 312. Most come from working families in the area. We have some cases of social vulnerability, but overall, they are children with a lot of potential. And if someone wanted to donate resources for a complete renovation of the school? Emily stopped walking and looked at him. Mr. Johnson, it would be like a miracle. But I need to be honest, we have faced disappointments. We have had promises that did not materialize. What if I guaranteed that wouldn't be the case? That night, Robert was back in his private office at the mansion, but this time he was not alone. He had called the 3 best architects and engineers he worked with. I want you to develop a complete modernization project for this school, he said, spreading the photos he had taken across the table. Not a superficial renovation, a complete modernization. Mr. Anderson, said Roberto, the lead architect, this will cost much more than the $40,000 mentioned in the initial report. To do a really good job, we're talking about at least $80,000. It doesn't matter. And there are bureaucratic issues, added Marina, the engineer. Donations to public schools need to go through specific processes, bidding. I will take responsibility for all the bureaucratic aspects. Just make sure you design the best possible school within the available space. Mark, the 3rd team member, flipped through the photos with growing interest. Can I suggest some innovations? Rainwater harvesting system, solar energy, community garden. Suggest whatever you want. Money is not an issue. When the professionals left, it was already past midnight. Robert remained alone in the office. He picked up a photo he had discreetly taken. Jake playing in the schoolyard with other boys, laughing as he kicked an improvised soccer ball made of paper and string. At that moment, he understood something fundamental. For years, he had used his wealth to accumulate more wealth, to impress people, to maintain a lifestyle that deep down did not fulfill him. Now, for the first time, he was using his money for something that truly mattered. He picked up the phone and called Mr. Johnson, his lawyer. Mr. Johnson, I need you to create a foundation for me. I want it to be specifically for investments in public education. All right, Mr. Anderson, what initial amount do you intend to allocate? Robert did a quick calculation. His company had made $8 million in the last quarter. $2 million to start. $2 million. Sir, are you sure? That's a significant amount. I'm sure. And I want everything to be done anonymously. No one can know that I am the donor. 3 days later, while having coffee in the kitchen before the usual time, Robert watched Sarah preparing the morning coffee. She seemed lighter that week. Jake had received a new pair of sneakers through a special promotion that Robert had discreetly arranged at the school. Sarah, he said casually, how is Jake doing at school? Very well, Mr. Anderson. He even mentioned that they are going to start some renovations there. Something about an anonymous donation. She smiled. The kids are excited. They're going to have a new library and real computers. Robert nodded, hiding his smile. That's great. Education is important. It is, Mr. Anderson. It's the only thing that can change a child's future. At that moment, observing Sarah's genuine joy while talking about the improvements at her son's school, Robert knew he had found something he had been searching for years without realizing it, a purpose that went beyond himself. The 5th month brought a storm that Robert had not anticipated. The renovations at Jake's school were progressing rapidly, a project that had transformed into a complete modernization that caught the attention of the entire community and local media. It was a sunny May morning when everything spectacularly fell apart. Robert was at the construction site, disguised in simple clothes and a cap, talking to the foreman about the finishes of the new library, when his cell phone rang insistently. It was Marcia, his secretary, with a voice shaken by nervousness. "Mr. Anderson, you need to return urgently. Miss Smith is here at the office and she is furious." She brought journalists. Journalists? Robert stepped away from the noise of the machines. "What journalists?" "From the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Times. She's talking about an investigation about public money." "Sir, it's better if you come quickly." Robert's heart raced. He had been extremely careful with all the documentation of the donation, but he knew that Beatrice was capable of creating a scandal even where there was no crime. An hour later, he was faced with a scene he had never imagined living. The entrance hall of his office in downtown Chicago was buzzing with journalists, cameras, and microphones. Beatrice, wearing a red suit that made her look even more dramatic, was gesturing indignantly at a reporter. "I demand a full investigation," as she said to the cameras. "My ex-fiancé is using money of dubious origin to promote himself politically through suspicious donations. It's a clear money laundering scheme and premature electoral propaganda." Robert crossed the tumult in silence, ignoring the journalists' questions, and entered his office. Marcia followed him, closing the door behind them. "How did she find out about the school?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I don't know, sir. She arrived here an hour ago with those journalists and started making accusations. She's saying that you ended the engagement because you were involved in corruption, and that she discovered it." Robert poured himself a glass of water and looked out the window at the chaos that had settled in the lobby. "Call Mr. Johnson immediately, and prepare a conference room. I'm going to hold a press conference. Sir, are you sure? Maybe it's better to wait." "No, Marcia. I'm tired of hiding." 2 hours later, Robert was sitting in front of 15 journalists in his conference room. He had changed from a simple suit to a more formal one, and brought with him a folder with all the documents of the donation. Beatrice was sitting in the front row, with a satisfied smile that would soon turn into surprise. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," he began, his voice firm and clear, "I apologize for the commotion this morning. I am here to definitively clarify the accusations that have been made against me." "Mr. Anderson," interrupted a reporter from the Chicago Tribune, "is it true that you irregularly allocated $2 million for renovations at a public school?" "It is true that I allocated $2 million for renovations at a public school," Robert replied calmly. "What is not true is that I did it irregularly." He opened the folder and distributed copies of the documents. "Here are all the receipts. The donation was made through the Transformative Education Foundation, legally created for this specific purpose. All taxes were duly collected. The entire process underwent independent auditing by Johnson & Associates. But why the anonymity?" asked a journalist from the Chicago Times. "Because I didn't want my donation to turn into personal marketing. I wanted the attention to be on the children who would benefit from the renovation, not on me." Beatrice shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Clearly she did not expect this total transparency. "Mr. Anderson," continued another reporter, "your ex-fiancé claims that you ended the relationship to cover up these suspicious activities. How do you respond to that?" Robert looked directly at Beatrice for the first time that morning. I ended my relationship with Mrs. Smith. I discovered that our values are incompatible. She viewed my decision to help underprivileged children as something suspicious or politically motivated. I see it as a basic social responsibility. Do you have political ambitions? Asked a third journalist. None. I am a businessman and intend to remain one. But I believe that those who have financial means also have a moral obligation to give back to society. And why specifically this school? Robert took a deep breath. It was the question he had been waiting for and dreading, because I witnessed a situation that deeply moved me. A child being humiliated at school for not having a proper pair of sneakers. It made me reflect on the social divide that exists in our city and my responsibility to try to bridge it. Victoria could no longer contain herself. She abruptly stood up from her chair. Which child? Are you making up this story to portray yourself as a hero? The silence in the room was awkward. All eyes turned to her, and Robert saw expressions of disapproval on the journalists' faces. Miss Smith, he said with deadly calm, you personally tore up the letter that this child wrote to Santa Claus. You called a 7-year-old boy a low-income neighborhood kid and said he shouldn't set foot in your house. Do you really want me to tell this story publicly? Victoria paled. You can't. I can and I will, because it is the truth. Robert turned to the journalists. Gentlemen, the real motivation behind these accusations is personal revenge. Miss Smith is upset because I discovered she had prepared a prenuptial agreement that guaranteed her 50% of my assets in case of separation, along with a monthly alimony of $20,000. The journalist stirred, taking frantic notes. You are Victoria began but was interrupted. A man who decided to use his fortune for something useful instead of supporting social parasites. Robert finished. Gentlemen, I have a copy of the contract that Miss Smith secretly drafted. Feel free to review it. That night, after the media storm had passed, Robert was home, alone for the first time in weeks. Victoria had left his life in a definitive and spectacular manner, taking with her a few belongings and a shattered reputation. He was in the kitchen trying to prepare a sandwich, a skill he had lost during years of luxury, when Sarah arrived for the night shift. She usually didn't work on Saturdays, but had offered to help with the cleaning after the day's turmoil. Mr. Robert, she said hesitantly, I saw the news on television. And what did you think? Sarah watched him for a long moment. I think you are a very brave man. It must not have been easy to expose your private life like that. It wasn't, but it was necessary. Can I ask you something? She approached the counter where he was struggling with the bread. Of course. Why did you do it? The school renovation, the foundation. Why really? Robert stopped trying to cut the bread and looked at her. Because, for the first time in years, I found something that makes me feel my life has a purpose greater than accumulating money. And what will happen now? Now, he said, smiling for the first time that day, I will learn how to make a sandwich. And tomorrow I will visit the school to see how the library's finishing touches are coming along. Sarah smiled too. Do you want me to help with the sandwich? I accept. It seems I have a lot to learn about simple things. As they prepared the improvised meal together, Robert realized that for the first time in years, he felt at home in his own kitchen. The 6th month brought a discovery that would completely change the dynamic between Robert and Sarah. It was a rainy June afternoon, when the Chicago winter announced itself with its fine and persistent drizzle, that Robert decided to investigate something that had intrigued him for weeks. He was in his office, reviewing contracts for a new development in Lincoln Park, when he noticed a note in the margin of an architectural project. It was a precise technical observation about space utilization and sustainability that caught his attention with its sophistication. Upon checking the authorship, he found it had been made by one of the junior architects on his team. Jake, he called when the lead architect entered for the weekly meeting. Is this note here on the Lincoln Park project yours? Jake examined the document and shook his head. "No, sir. It was from Emily. She has some really interesting ideas about sustainability." Robert frowned. "Emily? We don't have any Emily on the team?" "Oh, sorry. It's the nickname we give to the freelance consultant we hired for the review of the social projects. A very competent architect. She's the one who has been making these excellent technical observations." "Which consultant?" Jake flipped through some papers. "Sarah Johnson. Her company is called SJ Sustainable Designs. We started working with her 2 months ago on the recommendation of the foundation staff." Robert felt the world spin. "Sarah Johnson?" "Yes, sir." "Excellent professional. She has innovative ideas and charges very little. In fact, she suggested several improvements for the East Side School project." That night, Robert came home with a mix of curiosity and confusion that he couldn't disguise. He found Sarah in the kitchen, as always, preparing dinner that he rarely ate at home. But this time, he looked at her with completely different eyes. "Sarah," he said, trying to keep a casual tone, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Mr. Robert." "Did you study architecture?" Sarah stopped stirring the sauté and turned slowly. Her eyes revealed a mix of surprise and something that seemed like embarrassment. How did you know?" "I found out by chance today." "Are you the consultant from SJ Sustainable Designs?" Sarah lowered her eyes and nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed and leaned against the counter. "Because I didn't think it was relevant to my work here. Sarah, you graduated in architecture from a federal university and work as a housekeeper in my home. How is that not relevant?" "Is it relevant?" "Mr. Anderson," she said, finally looking him in the eye, "you hired me as a housekeeper 5 years ago. I needed the job, I need the salary, and I have always fulfilled my duties well. My background doesn't change that. But you could be working as an architect." "Could I?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "You know how hard it is for a black woman, a single mother, without connections or influence, to find work in a field dominated by affluent white men." Robert fell silent, absorbing the raw truth of her observation. "When I graduated," she continued, "I was 8 months pregnant. No firm wanted to hire me. I sent resumes to dozens of companies. When I managed to get an interview, I could see the disappointment on people's faces when they realized I was, well, different from what they expected. And after Jake was born, I had a child to support and couldn't afford to be unemployed searching for my dream job. I took the first job that came up, taking care of a family's home in MoMA." Robert sat down in one of the chairs at the kitchen table. "And SJ Sustainable Designs?" Sarah turned to the stove, stirring the food absent-mindedly. "I started 2 years ago. I work at night and on weekends. Small projects, mainly residential renovations and consulting for non-profits. Nothing too significant. Roberto said you made excellent observations on the school project. That was coincidence. When I learned that Jake's school would be renovated, I offered to take a look at the plans. I wanted to make sure everything would be done in the best possible way. And you didn't know I was the donor?" Sarah stopped stirring the sauté and looked at him. "I'd suspected. First, from the sneakers Jake received in the school promotion. Then, when I saw that the renovation project was much more sophisticated than anything a typical anonymous donation would allow. And finally, when I found out that the company responsible was the same one handling your commercial projects." "And why didn't you say anything?" "What would I say? Thank you for renovating my son's school, boss." Sarah turned off the heat and faced him. "Mr. Anderson, you did something wonderful for those children. But I didn't want you to think I was trying to take advantage of the situation." Robert remained silent for a long moment, processing everything he had discovered. "Sarah, can I see some of your projects?" She hesitated. "Why?" "Professional curiosity." 20 minutes later, he was in Sarah's small apartment in Eastside, the first time he had visited an employee's home. The contrast with his mansion was striking, but what impressed him most was the organization and care with which every inch of the space was utilized. The apartment had 2 small bedrooms, a living room that also served as an office, and an open kitchen. But it was impeccably clean and decorated with creativity and good taste. Plants were scattered throughout the house, shelves made from repurposed crates, and a dining table that had clearly been restored by hand. "Jake, come say hello to Mr. Anderson," Sarah called. The boy appeared from the bedroom, wearing a simple but clean pajama set, and greeted Robert politely. He was taller than Robert remembered, and he noticed that he wore the new sneakers even inside the house. Clearly, they were his most prized possession. "Jake," Robert said, kneeling to be at the boy's height, "how is the new school?" And the child's eyes lit up. "It's amazing. There's a library with real books, working computers, and the playground doesn't have holes in the ground anymore. And you know what else? There's a garden where we plant vegetables. And do you like studying there?" "I like it a lot. And now no one laughs at my sneakers anymore," he said, looking down at his feet with pride. Sarah showed Robert her small work desk, where projects were spread out, an old but well-maintained T-square, and a laptop that had clearly seen better days. "These are some of my works," she said, showing him hand-drawn floor plans with impressive precision. Mainly renovations to maximize small spaces and sustainable projects for non-profits. Robert examined the drawings with growing admiration. There was a technical sophistication and aesthetic sensitivity that rivaled the best professionals in his company. "Sarah," he finally said, "these projects are exceptional." "Thank you. No, you don't understand. They are truly exceptional. You have an extraordinary talent." Sarah smiled shyly. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness. It's professional observation." Robert looked at her seriously. "Sarah, have you ever thought about working as a full-time architect?" Every day. But as I said, it's not that simple." "What if it were?" "What do you mean?" Robert took a deep breath, making a decision that would change both their lives. "What if I offered you a real opportunity?" The following month brought profound changes that neither of them had anticipated. It was a clear July morning, with the winter sun filtering through the windows of Robert's office, when Sarah arrived for her first official meeting as an architectural consultant for Anderson Developments. She wore a navy blazer that she had clearly bought for the occasion, still with creases from the store, a pair of black dress pants, and comfortable flats. Her hair was down for the first time Robert could remember, elegantly framing her face. She carried a synthetic leather portfolio and wore a mixed expression of nervousness and determination. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she said, stopping at the entrance of the meeting room. "Good morning, Sarah, but now you can just call me Robert. After all, we are work partners." "It's going to be hard for me to get used to," she admitted, smiling nervously. At the table were Roberto, Marina, and 3 other architects from the team, all clearly curious about the new special consultant the boss had hired. Robert noticed some questioning looks. A black woman, visibly from a humble background, was not the usual profile of the company's collaborators. "Everyone," Robert began, I am pleased to officially introduce Sarah Johnson, our new Director of Social Projects and Sustainability. She will be responsible for coordinating all our investments in education and affordable housing." "Director?" Robert couldn't hide his surprise. "Yes, Sarah will be an executive of the company, with full autonomy to develop projects in the social sector." Robert turned to her. "Sarah, can you present your proposal for the next 6 months?" Sarah took a deep breath and opened her portfolio. During the previous week, she had worked tirelessly on an ambitious plan that combined her passion for architecture with her intimate knowledge of the needs of low-income communities. "Thank you, Robert," she said, and he noticed how naturally the words flowed. "I've prepared a project that I named Transformative Communities. The idea is to create a replicable model of sustainable urban development for low-income neighborhoods." She stood up and began to draw on the whiteboard, her movements gaining confidence as she spoke about her area of expertise. "Instead of just renovating schools in isolation, I propose that we create integrated community hubs. Each hub would have a model school, a basic health center, a community library, spaces for vocational training, and areas for recreation and sports. Marina leaned forward, intrigued. And the funding? It would be a public-private partnership. Our company would provide resources and technical expertise. The city would provide the land and permits, and the community would contribute labor and maintenance. Robert flipped through the designs that Sarah had distributed. These projects are very sophisticated. Did you develop all of this by yourself? Yes, I've been working on them for 2 years in my spare time. How many hubs do you propose to start with? Robert asked. 3. One in East Side, one in South Side, and one in Maple Grove, areas I know well and where I have already identified suitable land. The meeting extended for 3 hours. When it ended, Robert saw in the eyes of his colleagues something he hadn't expected: genuine respect for Sarah. Her ideas were innovative, technically sound, and, more importantly, stemmed from a real understanding of the needs of the communities. "Sarah," he said when they were alone, "you surprised me." "In what way?" "I expected good ideas. I didn't expect an urban transformation plan costing $2 million. Sarah smiled. "You said money wasn't a problem, and it isn't. Approved." 2 weeks later, an unexpected discovery would change everything again. Robert was reviewing documents for the Maple Grove project when his private investigator, hired to verify land issues, brought information that left him perplexed. "Mr. Anderson," said the investigator, "I found something interesting about the Johnson family. The biological father of the child, go on, is the architect Robert Anderson, partner at Anderson and Associates, one of the most renowned firms in Chicago." Robert recognized the name. Robert Anderson, 42 years old, a specialist in high-end residential projects, married with 2 children. One of the most respected architects in the city. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And there's more. He never knew about the child's existence." "How so?" The investigator consulted his notes. "I discreetly spoke with people who knew the couple at the time. Robert and Sarah met in college. He was in his final year, she was in her penultimate. They had a relationship for a few months, and when she got pregnant, Robert had traveled for an exchange program in Spain. Sarah discovered the pregnancy after he left. She tried to tell him, but his family intercepted all communications. Did the family know? His mother, Mrs. Helen Anderson, knew. She organized the whole scheme to prevent Robert from finding out. She even threatened Sarah." Robert leaned back in his chair, processing the information. "And today? Does Robert still not know?" "Apparently, yes. He married 3 years after returning from Spain, had 2 children, and built a solid career. From what I gathered, he is an upstanding person. That night, Robert faced a moral dilemma that kept him awake until dawn. He had information that could change the lives of 4 people: Sarah, Jake, Robert, and himself. He was in the library of his home, flipping through the pages of a book without seeing them, when Jake asked something that echoed in his mind since the discovery. It was Sunday, and the boy had come with Sarah to gather some materials for the community project. He found Robert alone in the library, and with the naturalness of children approached him. "Uncle Robert," he said. He had started calling him that spontaneously. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Jake. Do you think my dad really doesn't want to meet me?" Robert felt his heart tighten. "Why do you ask that?" Because sometimes I think, if he knew I existed, maybe he would like me. Maybe he just doesn't know. And what would you do if you found out where he is?" Jake thought for a moment, swinging his little legs on the oversized chair. "I think I would want to meet him, but I wouldn't want Mom to be sad." "Why would your mom be sad?" "Because she does everything for me. She works hard, studies, takes care of me. If I wanted to have a dad too, she might think she's not enough. But she is, Uncle Robert. She's the best mom in the world." At that moment, Robert understood the complexity of the situation. It wasn't just about revealing a truth. It was about rewriting 4 lives irreversibly. "Jake," he said carefully, "what if I told you that maybe your dad really doesn't know you exist?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? Do you think that's possible?" It's possible. And if it were true, what would you want to happen? I would want someone to tell him. But someone Mom trusts. Someone like you, Uncle Robert. Robert hugged the boy, feeling the weight of the responsibility that Jake had inadvertently placed on his shoulders. That night, he made a decision that would change the course of all their lives. The 8th month brought revelations that none of the parties involved had anticipated. It was a muggy August afternoon as Chicago prepared for the arrival of spring, when Robert decided he was facing the most delicate situation of his life. He had spent weeks planning how to approach Robert Anderson. He couldn't just show up at his office and announce that he had a 7-year-old son. The situation required delicacy, diplomacy, and above all, absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. The Anderson and Associates office was located in Lincoln Park, in a renovated townhouse that combined modernity with historical charm. Robert had scheduled a meeting under the pretext of discussing a potential partnership in social projects, a half-truth that made him slightly uncomfortable. Robert Anderson was exactly as he had imagined, tall, slim, with brown hair featuring a few gray streaks at the temples, expressive green eyes, and a warm smile that immediately put people at ease. He wore a white linen shirt and dark jeans, with the casual elegance typical of successful architects. "Mr. Brandome," said Robert, extending his hand, "it's a pleasure to meet you in person. Your affordable housing projects have been making quite an impression in the area." "The pleasure is mine, Robert. You can call me Augusto." "Of course, coffee." They sat in the conference room, decorated with hanging plants and contemporary designer furniture. Augusto discreetly observed the man in front of him, searching for traits he might recognize in Jake. The eyes were different. Jake had his mother's brown eyes, but there was something in the way he smiled, in his expressive gestures, that echoed the boy. "So, Augusto, tell me about these social projects." Augusto spent 20 minutes genuinely explaining the work of the Transformative Education Foundation, the renovated schools, and the plans for community hubs. Robert showed real interest, asking pertinent technical questions and suggesting improvements. "Impressive," said Robert when Augusto finished. "This kind of initiative is much needed. And you mentioned you have an architect responsible for the projects?" "Yes, an exceptional professional. Sarah Johnson." Robert stopped stirring his coffee and looked up. For a moment, Augusto saw something shift in his face. Surprise, recognition, perhaps nostalgia. "Sarah Johnson?" he repeated slowly. "Do you know her?" Robert remained silent for a long moment, staring out the window that overlooked a small, internal garden. "I knew a Sarah Johnson in college many years ago. Could it be the same person?" "It's possible. She graduated from the University of Illinois." "Yes, it's her." Robert turned back to Augusto. "How is she?" "Well, very talented. She has a small child." Augusto carefully observed Robert's reaction. He saw a shadow pass over his eyes, followed by something that seemed like regret. "A child," murmured Robert. "Did she get married?" "No, she's a single mother." Robert stood up and walked to the window. "Augusto, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. How old is her child?" 7 years. The silence that followed was heavy. Robert rested his hands on the windowsill, his shoulders tense. Augusto counted mentally to 10 before speaking again. "Robert, can I tell you a story?" "Please." "A few months ago, I witnessed a scene that changed my life. I saw a child's letter being torn apart, a letter from a 7-year-old asking Santa Claus for a new pair of sneakers and the chance to meet the father he had never seen." Robert turned slowly, his face pale. "The child's name is Jake," Augusto continued. "Jake Johnson. An intelligent, polite boy who loves to draw house plans and dreams of being an architect, like his mother." "My God," whispered Robert, leaning against the wall. "Did Sarah never tell you she was pregnant?" "No, She tried to contact me when I was in Spain, but—" Robert paused, a terrible understanding forming in his eyes. My mother said Sarah had called a few times, but it was because of schoolwork. And you believed her?" "I was in love with Barcelona, with the exchange program projects, with the opportunities that were opening up. When I returned, I learned that Sarah had graduated, and I thought she had moved on with her life, without ever looking for her. Robert lowered his head. I was young, selfish. I was focused on my career, on my plans for the future, and there were other people. When I met my wife 2 years later, Sarah seemed like a part of a distant past. "Robert," said Augusto softly, "you have a son." The words hung in the air. Robert let himself slide down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. 7 years, he murmured. "I've lost 7 years of my son's life. You haven't lost him. You didn't know he existed, but I should have known. I should have insisted on talking to Sarah. I should have suspected when my mother said her calls weren't important." Augusto moved closer and sat on the floor beside Robert. "What matters now is what you will do with this information. I don't know. I have a family, Augusto. A wife, 2 children. How do I explain that I have another child I never mentioned because I didn't even know he existed? It's a complex situation. But Jake exists, regardless of the complexity." Robert lifted his head. "What is he like? Intelligent, sensitive, curious. He has your smile and his mother's determination. He constantly draws imaginary floor plans of houses he wishes to design one day. Does he know about me? He knows he has a father somewhere. Sarah has always been honest about that. But he doesn't know who you are. And Sarah, what does she think about all this?" Augusto took a deep breath. "Sarah doesn't know I'm here. She doesn't know I discovered who you are. You did this investigation on your own?" "Yes, and now I don't know if I did the right thing." Robert remained silent for several minutes. Finally, he stood up and returned to the table. "Augusto, can I see a picture of him?" Augusto hesitated, then took his phone out of his pocket. He showed a photo he had discreetly taken the previous week. Jake in the schoolyard of the renovated school, smiling as he showed a drawing to some classmates. Robert held the phone with trembling hands, his eyes filled with tears. "My God, he is my son. Yes. What do I do now, Robert? How do I fix 7 years of absence that I didn't even know I was committing?" At that moment, the renovations happening in the building revealed something unexpected. A worker entered the room, carrying a box of old papers found behind a wall that was being torn down. "Mr. Anderson, we found these old things here. Do you want to take a look before we throw them away?" Robert glanced distractedly at the box, but Robert approached out of curiosity. Among the yellowed papers, he saw something that made him stop. Envelopes addressed to Robert Anderson, with the sender Sarah Johnson. "Robert," he said, his voice tense, "look at this." Robert stepped closer and saw the envelopes. There were 7 of them, all with postmarks from 15 years ago. With trembling hands, he opened the first. "Robert, I discovered something important and I really need to talk to you. Please call me as soon as you receive this letter. It's urgent. With love, Sarah." He opened the second. "Robert, I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. Your mother said you can't receive calls, but this is very important. I'm pregnant." The third. "Robert, I don't know if you're receiving my letters. Our daughter, or son, is going to be born in October. I really wish you knew." Robert couldn't continue reading. The letters fell from his hands as he leaned on the table, sobbing. "She tried to tell me," he whispered. "All this time she tried to tell me." Robert carefully gathered the letters. There was proof that Sarah had desperately fought to include Robert in Jake's life, and that someone had deliberately prevented this. "Robert," he said softly, "now you know the whole truth. The question is, what will you do with it?" December arrived, bringing with it the promise of closure to a cycle that had begun exactly 1 year earlier when a child's letter was torn and a powerful man had his soul awakened. The last month would be marked by decisions that would redefine not only the fate of Robert, Sarah, and Jake, but also of everyone who had been touched by this journey of transformation. It was a sunny morning on December 15th when Robert called a meeting at the newly inaugurated East Side Elementary School. The institution had become a national model for transformed public education, with its air-conditioned classrooms, modern library, computer and science labs. indoor sports court, and even a community garden that fed both the school lunch program and families in the area. Present was Sarah, now officially recognized as the Director of Social Projects at Anderson Developments, Emily, the school principal, some teachers, parents, and, unbeknownst to Sarah, Robert Anderson. "Before we begin," Robert said, adjusting his glasses as he surveyed the packed auditorium, "I would like to tell a story. The story of how a torn letter changed the lives of many people." Jake was sitting in the front row next to Sarah, wearing a light blue dress shirt that Robert had given him as a gift the week before. The boy had visibly grown in the past few months, not just physically, but in confidence and joy. There were no more signs of the shyness that made him hide his feet when wearing old shoes. "Exactly 1 year ago," Robert continued, "I witnessed a scene that deeply embarrassed me. A letter from a child, simply asking for a new pair of sneakers and the chance to meet his father, was treated with disdain and cruelty." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, remembering that terrible day. "That letter made me question who I had become. A rich man, but empty. Successful in business, but a failure as a human being. Someone who had lost the ability to see the beauty in simple things." Robert paused and looked directly at Jake. "That letter was written by Jake Anderson, and I want everyone to know that it saved not only his life, but mine as well." The auditorium erupted in applause. Jake smiled shyly and waved to his classmates. "But today," Robert said, "I'm not here just to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about the future, and to reveal something I recently discovered." Sarah furrowed her brow, sensing something different in Robert's tone. "Jake," he said, "a few weeks ago you asked me if I thought your father really didn't know you existed. Do you remember?" The boy nodded, curious. "Well, I decided to investigate, and I found out that you were right." Robert signaled, and Robert slowly stood up from a chair at the back of the auditorium. "Jake, I would like you to meet someone." Sarah turned and saw Robert walking down the center aisle. Her face instantly paled, and she clutched the arms of her chair as if she might faint. "Robert?" she whispered, incredulous. Jake looked confused from his mother to the approaching man, then to Robert. "Uncle Robert, who is this man?" Robert stopped beside the front row, visibly emotional. His eyes couldn't look away from Jake, memorizing every detail of the face of the son he was seeing for the first time. "Jake," Robert said softly, "this is Robert Anderson. He is an architect like your mother, and he is your father." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Jake looked at Robert with wide eyes, then at Sarah, who was silently crying. "My father?" Jake asked, his voice small and filled with astonishment. Robert crouched in front of the boy, his hands trembling. "Hi, Jake. I didn't know you existed. If I had known, I would have come to find you much sooner. Is it true?" Jake asked, looking at Sarah. Sarah wiped her tears and nodded. "It's true, my love. He really didn't know." "Sarah," Robert said, turning to her, "I found the letters. All of them. They were hidden in my old office. My mother, she intercepted everything." Sarah closed her eyes, tears flowing freely. "I tried so hard to tell you. I know. And forgive me. Forgive me for not insisting more, for not to have suspected, for losing 7 years of our son's life." Jake, with the natural wisdom of children, looked at both parents. "Are you going to be sad forever?" The question broke the tension. Robert smiled through tears. "No, Jake, we're crying, but they are tears of joy, because we finally found each other." "And now?" asked the boy. "Are you going to live with us?" Robert looked at Sarah, who wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "Jake, life isn't that simple. Your dad has a family, a wife, and other kids. But that doesn't mean he can't be part of our lives." "What do you mean?" "It means," said Robert, "that you will have a dad who loves you and wants to be present in your life, even if we don't live in the same house. It means you will meet your half-siblings, who will love having such a special big brother. And your wife?" asked Sarah, her voice still trembling. "Marina is an amazing woman. When I told her about you and Jake, the first thing she said was, 'When are we going to meet them?'" Robert, who had been silently observing the family reunion, stepped forward. "If I may, I would like to make a proposal." Everyone looked at him. "Robert, I know you have a successful office. Sarah, you have extraordinary talent and a unique vision for social architecture. How about working together? What do you mean? Sarah asked. I propose a partnership between Anderson Developments, Robert's office, and S.J. Sustainable Designs. Together, we can expand community hubs across the entire country. Robert looked at Sarah. What do you think? I need to think. There's a lot happening all at once. Of course, said Robert. But there's one thing that can't wait. He made another gesture, and some school staff brought a table with paper, colored pencils, and markers. Jake, remember the letter you wrote last year to Santa Claus? I remember. How about we write a new letter? This time a letter of thanks. Jake smiled and sat down at the table. He began to write with the neat handwriting he had developed over the year. Dear Santa Claus, my name is Jake Anderson, and I am 8 years old now. I want to thank you because all my wishes have come true. I got new sneakers, lots of them. My school looks beautiful. My mum has a job that she loves. And the best part, I met my dad. He is really cool and designs houses like Mom. I also want to thank Uncle Robert, who is almost like a grandpa to me. He taught me that sometimes Santa Claus uses real people to make miracles happen. Next year, I won't ask for anything for myself because I already have everything I need. But if you can, help other kids like you help me. Thank you for everything. With love, Jake Anderson, son of Sarah and Robert. When Jake finished reading the letter aloud, there wasn't a single person in the auditorium who wasn't crying. Robert approached the boy and hugged him. Jake, can I tell you a secret? Sure. There is no Santa Claus. There are people who choose to be each other's Santa Claus. And you, with that first letter, taught me how to be Santa Claus. So you will keep being Santa Claus for other kids. We will, said Robert, looking at Sarah and Robert. We all will. 6 months later, in June of the following year, the first stone of the 4th community hub was laid in Miami, Florida. Robert was there, no longer as a lonely businessman, but surrounded by his new family, Sarah, who had become his partner and confidant, Robert, who generously and maturely shared fatherhood with Jake, and Jake, who at 8 years old was already talking about being a social architect like his parents. The mansion in Lincoln Park had been transformed into a coordination center for social projects, with its luxurious rooms converted into collaborative offices and the formal dining room now serving as a space for community meetings. Robert never remarried, but he also never felt lonely again. He had found something much more valuable than romantic love. He had found a family built on shared purpose and genuine love. On Christmas Eve that year, Jake wrote his 3rd letter to Santa Claus. Dear Santa Claus, now I know that you do exist, but not as I thought. You exist within the people who choose to do good. Uncle Robert is Santa Claus, Mom is Santa Claus, Dad Robert is Santa Claus, and I also want to be Santa Claus when I grow up. Thank you for teaching me that the magic of Christmas is not in receiving gifts, but in being the gift in someone's life. Merry Christmas to all the kids in the world. Jake Anderson, future social architect. And that's how a torn letter in December became the seed of a silent revolution that would change the lives of thousands of people. Because sometimes the greatest miracles start with the smallest gestures, and the greatest fortunes are those we share with those who need it most. Please like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and if you watched until here, comment, I watched until here, and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very emotional.